Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session. So today we have with us Mr. Keshav. Mr. Keshav is an engagement manager in McKinsey London's office. He comes with wealth of experience advising leading companies on a range of topics, including analytics, product management, product digital strategy transformations, and commercial strategy, investment due diligence, etc. He has also advised public sector on topics related to climate change. Besides, he has, alongside his daytime job, enterprise called Rural Roots from 2015 to 2020 in the food processing sector in India, through which he has employed over 100 women from below poverty line. Besides, Mr. Keshav is currently on a leave of absence from McKinsey to do a secondment with Ocado Retail Limited, the world's only pure grocer at scale at Ocado. He heads their media monetization business. So, on behalf of School of Management and Entrepreneurship, I would like to welcome Mr. Keshav. We are so happy to host you. And we have with us Shrutin, who will be moderating the session. Over to you, Shrutin. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So good afternoon, Keshav sir. So virtual dash is all yours, sir. Please start, sir.
Okay, great. I've prepared a few slides just to guide the conversation. So I'll just share that now. Cool. So for the topic today, I thought I'd speak a bit about managing tech projects and businesses as the imperative for the 21st century managers. Before I go into a bit of what I mean by that, I think I'll just give you a bit of intro because a lot of my job over the past 5 years has been as a manager managing a lot of tech projects. So I started out doing kind of classic strategy pieces as a business manager. But over time, increasingly 50 to 70% of the work these days is happening with companies who either want to go digital, who want to use data science, or who want to use the latest technologies. And that meant as a business manager, there was a certain amount of upgrading needed to understand how these tech projects work. So I'll probably just give you a bit of introduction and then go into a bit of detail. One thing as we talk through, I'd love for this session to be as interactive as possible. So please do stop me as and when you want, ask questions. I don't know if there's an opportunity to write on chat, so you can also write in chat in case you want certain questions to be aggregated, etc. And Shrutin, I don't know if there's a code here which you would prefer in terms of either aggregating questions or just allowing people to ask as and when they prefer.
So normally we shall take the questions at the end so that
Okay.
there will be a flow of continuity.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Perfect. So just a very quick introduction. As Akanksha mentioned, I'm currently the interim head of on-site media monetization business for Ocado Retail. I'll pause there. Like Ocado Retail is the only online grocer at scale. The difference with, I mean, you know, a lot of companies today that do online pure e-commerce, Amazon being the biggest, but it's very difficult for even the biggest companies, including Amazon, to do pure online grocery retailing, because with grocery, you have very short duration of food life. It needs to be delivered very soon. And plus the sheer size of orders sometimes when customers say order for 500 rupees or 250 rupees, it doesn't make online profitable. You'd rather prefer customers coming into store. And then the other point is usually when you order online on grocery, by the time someone actually picks that order for you, it's highly likely that the item is out of stock. So Ocado Retail has kind of gone through all those loops and it's solved all the problems in that space. It's a big technology business. They have a robotics arm, which they sell robots across the world, including to Japan, biggest grocery retailers in US, Australia, etc. And then they have the retail business, which is a joint venture between Ocado Group and Marks and Spencer, brand we are all familiar with. So I had the media monetization business. And what is media monetization? It's the same business as you would think with Google and Facebook, right? So when you go online, you type, Amazon also has a big business here. You type for, let's say you want a water product, so you type for water. As soon as you type for water, you will see some banners and search terms coming, right? Like Google would give you paid search terms. So as soon as you type for something, the first few listings will be for suppliers who've paid for it. So I'm in charge of the business that monetizes that space on our website. Maybe towards the end, I can show you a bit of how the website works today. What are the search terms that come through? What is the merchandising that's available, and which brands typically would buy this, right? So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm on a leave of absence for 6 months doing that. Before I started this, I was a engagement manager at McKinsey, where I've been for over 3.5 years. So starting as an associate and then gradually progressing to engagement manager. And as an engagement manager, I lead projects for McKinsey. I'm kind of the day-to-day in charge with our clients, with our teams, with our senior leadership. And I've done a range of projects here. A lot of my projects have been in digital and analytics space because that's where a lot of work is happening today across industries. Every industry wants to go digital with COVID, especially. The kind of, if you looked at online share, if I just give you Ocado's example, right? Like grocery share in online was only 7% of all sales happened online. And that took about 20 years. Now, in the last 6 months, that has doubled from 7% to 14%. So all the growth of 20 years has happened in 7 months of COVID. So that's the amount of scale of change that's happening, which is across industries, construction being one where you would never imagine things going online so much. A lot of construction players are going online. So they're building lots of digital products. When you use lots of digital products and you have databases, there's a lot of data science that goes along as well. So there's a lot of work that's happening there, and that's where I've been doing most of my work. In the initial few years, I did classic strategy pieces for clients. And I've also done some very cool climate change work with governments, which is on how do they get a big source of climate change carbon emissions is residential buildings. It's the third biggest source, contributing to about 25%. So I've advised governments on how they can eliminate residential carbon emissions by 2050, which is one of the biggest challenges right now in the EU as part of the Paris Agreement. Before I started with McKinsey, I came to London for my studies. I came here to do my MSc Economics from the London School of Economics as a Commonwealth Scholar. And that's how I started my professional career here in London. Three things I thought would be helpful to cover from my experience, three objectives. I think the first is the key areas of technology for managers, right? So when we talk about tech projects, tech businesses, what kind of areas are we talking for business managers here? The second, and this won't be exhaustive, I think as I come to it, you'll realize it covers a lot of it. Some of it I've put the names, but I haven't gone into the detail of it. The second is what is the role of managers in running technology projects compared to classic management or strategy projects, where all the business side of things, all the management side of things. What's the extra do you need to do when you're running tech projects and tech businesses? And third, I just thought I'd conclude with some examples of managerial opportunities in tech, either tech projects or tech businesses, and that's across verticals, right? It's not just the technology sector, but even in advisory services or even in industry. What is the range of projects and opportunities you could be seeing? So those are the three things I'd love to cover. So I'll start with the first objective of what are the areas of technology. And I've kind of made this slide simple. So I don't know how many of you are already familiar with this versus how many of you it's new. So I'll start simple and we can go into details. And then of course, if you feel you need even more details, do post the question and we can pick it up in the Q&A. So three key areas of technology for managers today, and this is kind of across sectors, literally all companies are pushing towards this. The first one is automation technologies. This includes things like RPA, which is robotics process automation, OCR, which is optical character recognition, NLP, which is natural language processing. Don't worry about all of this. In the next slide, I'll talk you a bit through how these things work, what I mean by these technologies. I think what you should know is, as a manager, the first thing you should know is these are technologies that help make your support and backend processes highly efficient. So if ever in a company you see there is a bit of inefficiency because emails are coming in, there's a lot of manual work in kind of taking those emails out, putting them in the folders, doing checks, all of which is prone to human errors, which then leads to a lot of back and forth and back-end processes. That's when it should strike you that there is technology out there, and automation technologies have been out there for 5-10 years. So a lot of companies are using it, but I'm still surprised that even the bigger companies still haven't gotten around to the full use of these technologies. But that's what should strike you when you think of backend and support processes that are repetitive, being manual. And it should tell you that, there is this technology, we should try and find a way for using it. The second is advanced analytics, and I've kept this quite broad. There are a lot of terms that are used here. You can say data science, you can say data engineering. Advanced analytics is the broader concept, where you could do simple descriptive analysis, or you could build complex data science model for diagnosis or forecasting analysis, right? So advanced analytics caters to all of this. The objective is usually to improve business decision making. This decision making can be for customers, or it can be to sell more as commercial. There are lots of the use cases here. Essentially, what powers all of this is a lot of data and some kind of either basic or advanced model. And again, I'll give you a bit of an example, a case study in the slides to follow on how this gets used. And mostly, this will be complementary to your people, right? So your staff, when they're trying to solve a problem, they get more data points through these advanced analytics models. So it's an aid in decision making. The third is digital products, and the objective here is you building digital ways to reach customers or employees or other stakeholders. And examples abound here, which is why I won't get into a case study for this particular technology, but examples abound, right? You have the Ubers of the world, the Amazons of the world, which even before COVID started, they had built digital products because that's the way they reach customers. They don't have a physical store. Equally, you can think of like other unicorns who've now built startups, right? So Freshworks, for example, an Indian startup, which has become a unicorn now with over 1 billion valuation. They started out as a CRM software, right? Where it's more you keep your customer records, you're able to interact with your customers. But over time, they've included things like Fresh Teams, which, by the way, I just realized when I joined Ocado that Ocado uses Fresh Teams. And it's a brilliant software because you can go in and you can see how the organization chart is. You can reach out to your fellow employees. So it's a great way of just digitally connecting your employees. So I've skipped examples of that, but I'll give you detail on what you would do from a business perspective as a business manager when we come to digital products. These are three core technologies I'd love to cover today, which are already mature, and I've also used it quite a bit in my day-to-day work with clients. You'll see in the bottom, there are other technologies here, including blockchain, including cloud, for example, if you're doing ever an IT migration. I haven't covered these in this document for two reasons. One, like I personally haven't used these technologies extensively. So while I can tell you the concept about it, I want to justice by not being able to give you case studies or how these technologies work. And second, some of them are a bit more nascent than the above three technologies. Like if you think automation, if you think advanced analytics, digital products, they've been there for some time. They have matured over these last 5 years, and they're almost there to be used as it is today with some knowledge of the sector and how to use it. Some other technologies like blockchain, there have been applications of it, which you all know, like Bitcoin is one good example. But there are still some there's still some nuances in blockchain to be worked around, right? So things like how do you make it sustainable? First of all, you need a lot of computing power, but how do you make it sustainable from an environment perspective because of the electricity it consumes? And then the applications itself, right? So there's a bit of like government saying, would we accept these kind of solutions? Because there are always flip sides. So if you think of Bitcoin, for example, there has been a flip side in the last few years where Bitcoin was used as a method of payment in an online web commerce called Silk Route, which was used for trading drugs, right? So while it has good applications, governments are also kind of want to regulate this sector a bit more, which is not true of the above technologies. In most of the above technologies, like they're there ready to be used. Government has seen enough of it and government understands enough of it. So for those reasons, worth keeping in mind, there are lots of other technologies. These three are the ones that are increasingly more common in the workplace. And as managers, you need to know, and you'll definitely get exposure to these technologies, which is why you should know what is your role in these projects and with these technologies. I'll start with a bit of a case study just to explain the first bucket, so the automation technologies, RPA, OCR, NLP. This is a case study that is very typical of these technologies. So one area where you see this a lot is in the accounts payable process, right? It's a back-end process. I'll walk you through the broad steps of what an accounts payable process looks like. And then I'll give you an overview of how that technology comes into play. So typically what happens is if you think of, let's say let's say in this case, I'm Ocado Retail, right? So I'm the buyer, I buy goods from suppliers, from brands. So as Ocado Retail as the buyer, I would usually raise a purchase order to a supplier. Let's say the supplier in this case is Procter & Gamble, and they are...
Keshav, I think the
No,
screen
once.
blocked. It's not clear. I think you might refresh
No,
it.
sorry, it'll come slowly. There's a bit of text, it's got some animation, so it'll come slowly. But I'll walk slowly through each step. So first, Ocado Retail is the buyer. It raises a purchase order to a supplier, which let's say is P&G, which has about 200 products it sells. Through that purchase order, I'm basically indicating to P&G what is the order quantity I want for purchase. So let's say nappies, right? And I say I need 200 quantities,
I'm
volumes
sorry.
of...
Sorry to interrupt, sir, but actually there's a block, like a gray square in front of your screen. So can you please reshare it once? It's not about the animation, sir, but it's about
You're
yeah.
not able to see the text?
No, sir.
Does it get better here? Or no? Okay, let me then just skip the text. Can you see now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think then just focus on the top part for now. So the top part is the 4 steps that normally happens in an accounts payable process. So the first step is, like I said, as Ocado, I'll raise an purchase order to the supplier, which is P&G, and I'll say, this is how much order I need from you, P&G. Can you supply it? The second step is P&G as the supplier says, fine, I can supply these quantities. Here it is, I'll deliver to your warehouse, and I'll raise an invoice. As P&G, they'll raise an invoice and they will send it to Ocado in an email saying, I've supplied you 200 units of the good. Here is an invoice for you in the email. The third step is then the buyer, as here Ocado, will match the order quantity they've received in the invoice to what was in the purchase order, just to make sure P&G hasn't oversupplied or undersupplied compared to what the order Ocado had initially raised. And then the fourth is if the invoice number and the purchase order number match, the buyer company will make a payment to the supplier, right? So very simple steps in accounts payable, fairly standard across companies. Now, what is the technology that sits to automate this? And good companies have automated this fully, right? So when you go to second step, when the supplier sends an invoice, they normally send an invoice with a PDF and an email, right? So if you see the screen below, which says RPA, and then below RPA, I've just given you an example, right? So in this case, there's an email that I have received, and that's from P&G, which is a draft order invoice. So they send an email. That email has an attachment. Now, what the RPA technology does, and it's a code basically that says, go into the email, and from the title of the email, you'll realize who's the supplier and whether it has invoice or not. So the RPA technology will go into the email. It'll know it's P&G. It'll know it's an invoice. It'll know there's a PDF. It'll take the PDF. It will then put it into a folder, let's say a Dropbox or a box folder where all the invoices get stored. So the robot goes, picks up the PDF, puts it into a folder in P&G. So far, that's all RPA, and it'll open the PDF. Once it opens the PDF, you'll see on the right, imagine this to be the PDF with the data, right? So there's something about, 529651 is the SKU number, for example. There's order quantity 216, so 216 units were ordered. Now, here's where you use the optical character recognition technology, which basically goes in and says, it's a PDF. It has like optical characters. I understand exactly what it is. I understand there's order here, there's 216. So no matter what format a PDF comes in, it will be able to understand order is this field. This is the number that goes along with it, 216. It will then pick up that number and transfer it into automatically in an Excel, right? Where you can do very quick matching. So it'll say 216, I'll transfer into an Excel. It has the SKU number, the product ID. It has what was in the invoice as order quantity, 216. What was in the purchase order as order quantity, 216. Did it match? Yes. And then the RPA will, once it's matched, the RPA will basically take all the matched invoices and then a payment is made, right? Now, this doesn't involve much of a human element. The only human element that comes here is if you have a non-match. That's when you'll have an accounts payable person coming in and like speaking to the supplier and why things didn't match. But you're able to use these technologies. And what are these technologies doing here? One is, for those of you who've used VBA, I think the simplest way to explain is it's code which can do tasks for you online, right? Like moving from email to a folder, opening a PDF, and then kind of running the final loop on Excel itself to see whether it's matched. What's optical character recognition? It's like any PDF you open of any sort, as it recognizes wherever orders come, wherever prices come, and then it can lift and pick that data from PDF to an Excel. So those are two technologies that get used extensively in accounts payable. And only once I did a project like this, I understood the implications. So right now we are doing in Ocado an RPA project. I haven't given the details here, but the gist of it is, as a retailer, we get a lot of submissions from suppliers on promotions, right? So Coke would say, I want to sell 2 units for £6, or I want to give 50% off. And almost every month we get promotions for the next month. It was quite manual today because suppliers would send us emails with their promotions, and we have over 2,000 suppliers. So every period we would get more than 2,000 emails because sometimes suppliers would want to change their promotions. So it was high admin. It wasn't as a business manager, you also need to think things like legal and compliance. It wasn't matching that because usually an auditor will come and ask, where did the supplier agree for these promotions? We've now fully automated it so that every time an email comes, the RPA goes and takes it from the email to our box folder. And in the box folder, we run a bunch of algorithms actually that says these promotions work for us because customers get good discounts. The customers are also funding these promotions, et cetera, et cetera. So it's become from 100% manual to now just about 5 to 10% manual, and we've reduced 90% of the time and admin we use in these systems. So that's case study 1 on automation technologies. Case study 2 is about use of advanced analytics, and here I've given a case study on fraud detection in insurance. This is from one of my work 3 years back. Insurance works pretty similar across countries. So let's start with the left-hand side, which is what 95% of the insurers do today. So of course, like imagine you've taken an insurance, right? So you've taken an automobile insurance, and you've had that insurance for some time, and then something happens to your car, there's a slight damage. There's insurance for it. So you're the claimant. You're the person who's taken the insurance. So you're the claimant. Your first step is you immediately would call up the insurance company and you would tell them, I've had this incident. I want to give you information. On the insurance side, there are usually claims handling divisions, which are separate. So they pick up the call, they take all the details from you as the claimant. They'll take all that information. They will then do a first check. So there's chances that the claim could be fraud because there are instances of that happening. So what the claim handler would do is they'll take all the information and pass it to their counter fraud unit. And they'll ask for them to check if there's any potential for the case to be fraudulent. The counter fraud team typically spends 5 minutes per case, depending on the volume handled, because they get like thousands and thousands of claims. So they can't really go into the depth of each at the first point. So usually what the counter fraud team will do is they'll spend 5 minutes looking at all the information received. And then they do something called triaging. And triaging is a quick exercise, right? It came during World War time, but it basically says, should I investigate this case further, or based on the details, there's no need for any investigation for fraud? So they'll spend 5 minutes to do that kind of triage, and they'll say, let's make a decision on whether or not the claim should be paid, or we should investigate further. Now, so that's step 4. And then step 5 is like, either it gets paid or it goes to investigation. But the quality of this decision from an insurance perspective, it depends a lot on the experience of the team. So someone who's been there 20 years and they've seen cases coming, based on some information, they get a sense of whether or not the case could be fraudulent. But someone who's just joined the counter fraud team, who doesn't have the experience, they reach very different outcomes and usually worse off because they don't have the experience of what details, if you put together, actually would sound like fraud, right? So it's very manual, and therefore what happens is the quality of the fraud decision varies by team members and depends on the experience of the team as a whole. Now, that was the situation of one of our clients as well. And then what we ended up doing on the right is the model we went to. We said we'll use advanced analytics to aid these decisions. So on the left-hand side, you'll see there's like a cylinder, right? That's usually a cylinder is how you think of databases, right? So that's why the cylinder. But what you do is you think of what's all the data you would need to build a cool fraud detection model, right? And here I've given you some examples. For every claimant, you want to know what is the date they took their policy started. You want to know what is the date the claim came in. You want to know their previous claim history. And there's a lot of data here because insurers basically pull together all their claims data across their claimants into a central database just for this reason. Because you could have someone who's taken insurance, let's say with LIC, who committed fraud, and then the year after they take insurance with ICICI. Now, ICICI will get to know that the same claimant committed fraud with LIC the last year. Right, so that's what is the previous claim history. You share that information on who's put what claim in so that you protect insurance companies from fraud. You can use a lot of sensor data. So in the car example, now increasingly a lot of insurance companies are asking their clients to put some sort of sensor in their cars in return for a lower premium. Because when you put sensor in car, you can monitor things like speed, right? So if you're actually going above speed limit and you've had an incident, the insurance company is not liable to pay for it because you've crossed thresholds. So this gives more data. Location data, classic. I think you can collect location data either through apps or even by tying up with travel agencies and airlines, right? There was one incident where at a particular insurance company, the claimant made a claim for their car damage. And it turned out the day they made the claim for, based on data from airlines, the same day they were in another country, which basically means they'd given out their car to their friends and the friends caused the damage and there is no insurance for the friend, right? So that's how they got to know that this is actually fraudulent because the actual person who had the insurance was in another country when the car was damaged. So there's location data, and then you can put claim amounts. Like normally claim amounts, like are you claiming for 500 rupees, 1,000 rupees? When you see there's something in insurance called organized fraud, where basically you have 50 people asking for the same kind of damage, and they usually put the same claim amount. So you can very quickly detect that. But the point of all of this is you can put this another 200 data sets here, which will all enrich the data. But with all of this, you can run a fraud propensity model that tells you what is the percentage likelihood. Once you get all the claim information and you type it in the system, it will immediately tell you what is the percentage likelihood that the claim is fraudulent. Is it 10%, 20%, 80%, 90%, right? It can give you the bit of idea of that. And it uses some metrics there. So if it says like, if you claim immediately after the policy started, there is high likelihood of fraud because you've taken the policy or maybe you've had the incident and then you've taken the policy and then you've made a claim. But the propensity model will use all of this and say, this is the propensity, right? Now, then the propensity model will give that information to the counter fraud team. So as you know from the left-hand side when we discussed, right, counter fraud team receives a lot of details from the claims handlers. And that's where they were making the decision. But now they're getting an extra input from a model. They're saying, I know all this information from a claims handler, but on top, what I now know is what is the percentage likelihood that a claim could be fraudulent. And I'll make decisions based off that. Now, this improves the decision making, right? Because let's say I go into a counter fraud unit. I have no idea of what are the indicators for fraud. The first day I join, I get lots of details, and I think most of them are fraudulent, where actually it may not be fraudulent. It's just wrong with decision making on my side because I don't have the 20 years of experience that my colleague has. But suddenly I get a model that is using the organization's last 20 years of experience to tell me that there's a 70% fraud on this, there's a 20% fraud on that. So what suddenly I do is I use that model in part with all the other information I'm receiving to make much better decisions on whether or not a case is fraud. And ultimately, it's a better experience for customers because I'm not going to investigate something that's fraudulent when the model is telling me there's 0% or 10% chance. So customers get paid quickly and they're having a brilliant customer experience. And the company is also doing well because where there is a good likelihood of fraud, we are not paying out, right? So we will fight that case and we'll save that money rather than pay that out to the customer, where the model is saying actually there's a 90% chance of it being fraud. You now there's a question here whether you can completely automate this, right? And you say if it's more than 80%, you don't need any human to see it. Usually in most companies, we don't do that because you need a bit of human judgment here as well. So let's say it's 60% fraud. Is 60% high, 60% low, right? So sometimes there are thresholds that you will have to establish. And that's why you want to see all the other information that you get from the claims handler as well. And maybe you want to speak to the claimant himself or herself and ask some questions to clarify before you make the decision. So that's why all these models are mostly complementary to humans, and they allow for better decision making by using lots of data here. So I just saw the question. Maybe I should then, if it's okay, if I can just respond to that.
Please, sir, please do so.
Yeah, so the question was whether it's a deep learning model or feature-based. So there are multiple ways of doing it. So the simplest way people start is a rules-based model, right? Which I think is what you're saying is features-based. But the rules-based model would say if the date of claim is less than 1 month after the policy inception, then this should be into the red zone, which means there's a high likelihood. That's how a lot of companies start as they build their data science, data engineering teams. Slowly you get, I would not say deep learning. I think there's a area between deep learning, like neural networks, etc., and rules-based. And these are usually models like random forests, that is a better version of regressions. It's the more advanced statistical models. And depending on the use case, you could use a random forest, or I think there are 10 such models like that. In this particular case, we'd use the random forest actually. That helps you predict better. And then over time, like you would want to go and see to do neural networks, some unsupervised learning, etc. Because unsupervised learning could help you detect patterns from other variables, as long as you have fed lots of variables into this database. That's usually the maturity of companies, but most companies today are not there yet. Like for this client in particular, for example, we built out rules-based in 2 months, then we built out a random forest in the next 2 months. And then slowly, I think they've had a year now. It's also, by the way, worth keeping in mind, an important point. When you usually think of these models, it's not just from their predictive power, right? It could be that neural networks has amazing predictive power. So that's one axis. If you think of predictability as your x-axis, you could say rules has less predictability. Random forest has in between predictability, and then neural networks has high predictability. But your other axis is what is the ability of the users to comprehend the logic of the model. In this particular case, it's the claims handler who's using the model. They will never understand neural networks. They'll just see something coming out from the model and they'll see, okay, that's it. But if they actually want to know what's the reason there is high probability of fraud, they can't go into the model and understand that. With a random forest model, it's very easy. It's not that tough. You can explain it in simpler words. It's not a black box. So that's usually the trade-off you will need to take. How quickly can users of the model understand it at a high level? And what is the predictability power? And based on that, you decide what model to use. Was there static?
Apoorv.
Sorry?
That was from Apoorv, I think. Apoorv, is your question answered?
I think the next question is how is location data monitored?
Yeah, location data is, there are various ways of doing it. I think you would see with most of the apps today, where you could be sharing location data, right? So for example, when you use, let's say when you use your Swiggy would ask you for location data to give you best services in your neighborhood, right? So similarly, like with insurance companies, as they're going towards an app-based model, and there's one that I'd love for you guys to actually check out immediately after this session, where you can see the full scale of like technology being used for an insurance company. It's called Lemonade, and Lemonade will basically, it's an app, it's full self-serve. You're not speaking to anyone. You get an insurance within 5 minutes. It uses a bunch of advanced analytics plus robotics to give you that self-serve model. And they also are a public company now. So they are in the US stock markets. So worth seeing the app just to get a sense of what's the extent of technology being used. But when you open the app, they'll say, are you okay giving me location data? So if you say yes, then most of the location data at a customer level you get, but it's an option for the customer. So there are customers who say no, in which case you have tie-ups with transport companies, right? So you'll have tie-up with your rental companies who give cars. You'll have tie-up with airline companies who can give you details on passengers being out of the country, etc. You can tie up with train companies. So there are lots of tie-ups you can do here with companies where data sharing is possible. And that helps you detect, if you don't get location data directly from the customer, you can get it from these companies. Now, of course, if customers do also allow you to put sensors in return for lower premiums, then just from the sensor data, you'll get to know their location as well. So that's the other alternative. And I think most customers who feel they are doing things legally, they would usually be okay to giving sensor data if in return, you're giving them substantially lower premiums because you can monitor the risk for these customers. But location data is a more creative one, right? So you have to think creatively of all the data you need and then think of how can you get these data from different parties involved in the ecosystem of this business. Then I think the next one, should I leave that for Krishna? Should I leave that for you? It's about who all can do a Tech-MBA.
Yes, sir, please. Yeah, just leave it to us, sir.
You can answer questions related to your session. Others you can leave questions.
Okay, cool. Cool. I think that covers all of it then. So that was the second case study. And then, of course, feel free to ask questions at the end on this in case you want. As I said, I'm not covering the third one on digital products because you've seen so many applications, but I wanted to get to the second objective here of, what do, in all of these technologies, what do teams look like and what's the role of a business manager? This is a bit text heavy slide, so I'll go slowly, but I think it'll give you a good sense of, especially as a business manager, what are the kind of questions or your work that you would be answering. And the first takeaway I want, before we even get to the slide, the first takeaway I want to give here is people often think that doing a tech project means, or getting into the tech area means you need to know coding. And that's not true, right? Like there are specialists here and you need specialists here, including developers who will be proficient at coding. And then there's a role of a business manager who understands business well. They will not know coding that well, but they'll know business. They'll have a good understanding of how the technology works. And then they'll work with the specialists to get the business problem solved. Right. So I think that's one fundamental takeaway. You don't need to know in-depth coding. Maybe helpful to have, like, for example, when I was doing some of the data science work, we had like trainings for a day or 2 days that explained what is random forest model, what is neural networks model. And that level of detail is helpful for me to get in terms of what different models do and when they should be used. But I don't need to specifically go in and run the model myself, right? So there's an area for specialists there who train on what models to run, what use cases it's helpful for, how to improve predictability. And there's a case for business managers who know business really well, and they understand how the technical world works, and they can work with the technical people, but they're not in-depth coders themselves. So let's start with the first technology, right? The automation technology, the RPA, robotics process automation, optical character recognition, natural language processing that we first started with. So you'll see like there's a gap in between. So the left-hand side is the specialist roles and their activities. The right-hand side is the business roles and their activities. So left-hand side for automation technologies, you usually have developers, right? So they will write the codes for automation. A lot of it is done in Python or other languages, but they're essentially there to say, we can automate this and we'll run the code to automate this. And they'll work with the business people to make that successful. The business title here is you'll have a process or a project manager, right? So usually this will be someone in the business who feels it's inefficient and I want some help to automate it. So in the accounts payable example, it will be an accounts payable executive. Or in the promotions example I gave you, it is our promotions planning person. Now what their role is, they will design the new process and they'll document the new process, keeping in mind technical feasibility, right? Like that's why I say you need to know enough about what kind of technologies exist, because a process manager could very well come and say, listen, all I want is as soon as the email comes on my in my inbox, it should automatically go into matching. That's the next step. And if that's what they say, they don't understand the details or high level logic of how these technologies work, because they can't give a project to the developer that's impossible. So they need to understand the technical feasibility, and keeping that in mind, they develop the new process, they document it. And then the second point for them is they have to implement these processes within teams, right? So you might have to go and train your accounts payable clerks to say, listen, this is how the robotics is going to work. These are the steps. This is the final output you get, and this is how you use it. So they have to make sure that training is given. They tell everyone how it gets used. They kind of plan pilots as well, because you might discover some things not working properly. So all that is on the business side of things. Advanced analytics, the second technology we spoke about, was you have typically two roles. Some, I think, initially, so you have data scientists and data engineers, and I think increasingly you are trying to distinguish between the two. Before, these roles would have been combined. Now, what does a data scientist do? A data scientist would normally use their statistical knowledge and they'll code those models. So they need to be very savvy in statistical knowledge, but they also need to be very savvy in coding in a Python or an R or a Stata, right? So they need to know a bit of both. Data engineers, they usually create usable / scalable databases that can be used for lots of analytics use cases. So they're not going to model the predictive power of fraud. But what they will do is they will take all the databases possible that are needed, and they will clean those up so that they can be used. It's more data manipulation, but they'll get you to a point where the database is fully ready to be used by the data scientist. Now, previously, those two roles were the same. Like data scientists would do the cleaning up, they would do they will use the statistical knowledge, they'll code. But increasingly, these two fields are being separated. And that's partly because there are some tools for data engineers that data scientists don't need, and vice versa, but equally to get pace. Because a data scientist can be running a model on one use case, and at the same time, a data engineer can be creating a database ready to scale for another use case. So partly it gives speed as well. Then the business side of things, you have something called a translator, which has actually become a big field. So if you actually Google for analytics translator roles, you'll see an article in Harvard Business Review last year that we wrote, which explains the role of a translator and why increasingly this role is so much in high demand, because there are very few people who know enough on business, but also good enough on data science to speak to the data scientists and engineers. And it's a role where there's a gap that needs to be filled very soon. What is their role as a translator? They understand business requirements and they translate the problem to the specialist, right? So in this case, when I was a translator, I knew insurance and claims very well. I knew how fraud worked, what the team was doing, and I knew what was the problem they were trying to tackle. So I could translate that to my data science team to say, this is the objective. This is what we want to achieve. We want to build a fraud propensity model. I also knew enough about the business to work with them to say, what are the hypotheses? What data could be used for this model, right? So it's not that I just say this is the objective and they go and figure out all the data points that can predict fraud. So I work with them on that part because I know the business side well. Then, and I think here it's important to understand what the role distinguishes. When the data science team builds the models, I can check for model prediction. So more often than not, they'll run two models and you get a sense of which model is performing how based on different metrics. So I can check for model prediction, but I don't lead this work on what model is the best. That's where the data science expert gives their expertise, right? They're like, we've run both models. They'll calculate metrics like lift, which tells you how good a model is. It's similar to, for those who are familiar with regressions, it's like a R-square in regressions, right? Which tells you quality of model. So there are lots of other metrics with more advanced models. So, but they have to be the ones that guide me a bit there. I can always kind of do problem solving with them, but it's their area of expertise to choose which technical model runs better. And then the fourth point is like, once the model is all ready, we'll typically work with the users of the model to ensure correct use. So in the fraud example, it'll be the fraud team, right? So we need to tell the fraud team, listen, this is the model we've built. These are the 5-6 areas or reasons why a prediction could come out high or a prediction could come out low. So you work with them to make sure that the model actually gets used by the end users. So that's the role of the translator, and it's a business role, right? You are more a business-minded person who understands enough on data science and data engineering. Third is digital products. So when you build a digital way of reaching a customer, be it a web shop, be it an app, any of those. Um, on the specialist side, you typically have two roles. One is a developer. Again, a developer would build, I've given an example here of a website, but a developer would build the interface, for example, and the features that would be needed for customers. I think it's a bit different to the development work happens in automation technologies because the language is different, etc. You more have HTML, etc. that happens in development of digital products. Then you also have designers. Increasingly, most companies hire designers. What designers do is they understand customer requirements and they design the interface. So every time you hear of UX, right, user experience, you'll know that there's usually someone creative or designer who's thought about, okay, these are the features to build, but how do we make this available to customers in the most customer-friendly way? So they'll actually design how the app looks, how the website looks. They'll understand the customer requirements. They'll build it in. So that's a specialist role for designers. And then on the business side, you have something called a product manager, which I think if you just Google for product manager across all of tech, anywhere in the world, even non-tech, that role is very much in high demand because everyone's trying to build digital products. And you need a product manager who's essentially in charge of the product overall. What is their work? They develop the product strategy. So first they'll kind of think of what is the product that needs to be built to meet requirements. They'll think of what are the customer segments we should target. What is the competitive landscape looking like? The entire product strategy sits with them. They'll also develop the feature product requirements. So what features need to be built in? When I say features, it's like if you go into an app on, let's say, a financial, your bank, for example, what features do you want? Do you want a feature to easily transfer money? Do you want a feature to add a phone number and pay? So they'll typically go along with the designers, understand what those features are that need to be built, and then they'll help prioritize, right? Because not all features can be built at the same time. Each feature takes a certain amount of development days. So they'll say, okay, fine, adding phone number takes 100 days, but payment to a friend takes 1 day. So we'll help prioritize this. And maybe when we release it to customers, it won't have the phone number facility. But as soon as we release it in 2 months, we'll build that facility. So they do that kind of product roadmap. And then another thing they would do is they'll develop the go-to-market and sales strategy. So how do you actually take that product and sell it to customers? What's your route to the market? So all that sits with the product managers, and they'll work with the developers and designers to make sure that the interface is correct and the customers actually getting the digital products. So that's how the role is split. Again, like I said, from a business perspective, you are a specialist in business who knows enough on how these technologies work to work with the specialists in those areas. You don't need to do both. You don't need to be fully averse on the technical side if you're on the business management side of things. I also wanted to give a few examples, and I think these are things I'd love for you guys to just go online and search as to some softwares that get used extensively in tech projects. So you'll see this getting used everywhere from Google, Facebook, to doing the tech projects we would do at McKinsey, to tech projects that are happening in industry at the moment. And for any of you who are also interested in stock market investing, excellent kind of companies to go and check how they're doing. Right. So Jira and Confluence, these are two technologies owned by an Australian company called Atlassian. And as companies are getting more and more digital, these products are getting demanded a lot more. What does Jira do? Very high level. Jira is something you use in building digital products. You basically are able to work with your team to say how much work in software development are we doing, right? So in the example I gave you before, let's say there are 10 features. Feature 1 is building a way to pay friends easily. Feature 2 is building to pay using phone numbers. And let's say there are 8 more features. Each of them take different amount of developer days. You prioritize it. And then Jira allows you to track a lot of things, right? So you put your story, these are called stories. So you put a story and you say, I want to build an app that allows payment by phone. And along with that, you'll say the story is worth 10 points because it takes 10 developer days, for example. Another story is worth 1 point because it takes 1 day. At the end of a week, I, as a product manager, I'll be able to see, okay, the team has developed or delivered 6 features worth 10 points during the week. Now, as a team, I want to make that quicker and quicker, right? As any business problem, you want it to be efficient. So in a week from 10 points, I want the team to actually be building 60 points. story points, which means they're doing more work for the same amount of time period. So Jira is a way of of doing feature prioritization, roadmap, checking efficiency of your technical teams. Confluence is more like a wiki. So every data scientist, coder, etc., digital product, or even from automation perspective, they document all of these things in Confluence, which is accessible by the entire organization. So they can always go in. Let's say an accounts receivable wants to do the same thing that accounts payable did. They can go into Confluence and see exactly how accounts payable automated, and they can use that. Trello and Jira and Confluence are both owned by Atlassian. Trello is a great project management software, right? This you can use even in general day-to-day management. As an engagement manager, I usually would have 5 team members with me, each having a separate work stream. And we have something called check-in. So every day I would check in with the team member and I'd say, what's your goal for today? What's your goal for the week? Check out in the evening to say, okay, any areas of concern where help would be needed, etc. Right? So that's what we do. And Trello allows you to do that because in Trello, and you can use this yourself to see, but it allows you to put digital notes, right? Like notes you would put on the walls of things to do. It allows you to put it there, and you can change things very easily from things that are to do to in progress to done, and you can see what other team members are doing as well. So for me as an engagement manager, that was helpful because I could get a view of the entire team and help them when needed. Slack, I think most of you would be aware of. It's just a messaging service. Also, you can share documents, but increasingly, especially during COVID, a lot of employees want to get done with the amount of emails that come through. So normally now emails are only for high priority items. Every other message happens in Slack on the move. These are just some technologies. There are a lot more out there. I think for example, if you check some of McKinsey technologies, they have something called Kedro, which is very specific to data engineering. But those are things you should be aware of at least at the start, and over time, figure out a bit more on how they get used. I just see a few, maybe I'll take those questions after this last slide. My last slide was just to give you a high level understanding of the managerial opportunities in tech, right? So I've put this in 3 verticals. There are tech businesses, pure tech businesses, and there are lots of opportunities there. Amazon.com, they are hiring lots and lots and lots of product managers across lots of areas. So they are, for example, they're trying to get into grocery. They've not been able to do that for the last 10 years, but it is one of the high priorities for them. They're also starting their B2B business, where they're providing, for example, a transportation service for small and medium enterprises, which is like Uber for business. So they want product managers to help build those digital products for them. Ocado, again, it's a pure online grocer at scale. Everything is digital, so we're doing everything from data science. And you can imagine the sheer amount of data, right? With grocery and customers, every week purchases happening. So a lot of data science. We have an automation team where we are doing lots of automation work. And we're also building digital products because we only do digital, right? We don't have a physical grocery store where customers can go and buy. Everything is digital. Facebook, Google, again, they're quite big. The only difference with Facebook, Google to keep in mind is Facebook, Google, unlike Amazon or Ocado, they only hire people with some technical experience when they hire for product managers. Amazon cares more about people knowing the business side of things, and they feel the product management skills can be built on over time. Deliveroo is like Swiggy, but it's been around for a bit longer. Uber is doing a lot of work in this area, data science, a lot of data science roles that are coming up in Uber across the world. So tech business are definitely areas where you'll see these technologies getting used, and you need to know about them to get into them. Advisory services, some examples here. So McKinsey has 2 arms. You'll see there's something called Quantum Black. And Quantum Black is actually a company McKinsey had purchased back in 2014, I think. Quantum Black started out as a Formula One analytics company. So they actually built lots of dashboards for Formula One. So all the screens you see on Formula One, Quantum Black was responsible for that. So they have about 100 data scientists, data engineers, or a lot more. And then we acquire, and now we, of course, work a lot with Quantum Black across industries from insurance to pharmaceutical, lots of industries where we use their data scientists and data engineers to work on those analytics use cases. And then we also have an arm called McKinsey Digital, where we do pure digital products. So we build digital products for companies that want to go pure digital. And you can see, right, that the trend is just there. That space is so big that a general consulting company has moved into that space because that's where most of the work is happening. And that's true across lots of like advisory services. The other example is Accenture, because Accenture doesn't do much of strategy, etc. They do more on the technical side of things, including analytics and digital bills. You'll also see this example in industry. So I've given one example of UK and one example of India. So UK example is NatWest. They've built one of the best apps for a customer, very friendly, like based on fingerprint. You log in, you can make transactions very quickly. Just simply brilliant interface. And they did this 5 years back, right? So not just after COVID. A lot of banks are doing it now, but NatWest did it 5-10 years back, and they actually have a digital incubation arm where they think of digital products to build all the time. And then Apollo Hospitals, I think, great example where they've moved a lot of things digital completely. They got featured as part of the Harvard Business Review case study. I think they're the first private hospital in India to achieve that level of digital maturity, where you can do digital consultation online, plus a lot of other kind of digital diagnostics just purely online. So they are also building a lot of digital products. And the point of it was, these are just two examples. Across industries, you'll see an increasing move towards getting product managers or data science work or automation technology work. So the opportunity is a lot across spaces. I just wanted to give you a gist of which companies and what work has happened so far. So I think I have now come to the end of all the slides. I'd love to hear any kind of questions. I can already see some in the chat, which I can take, but in case any of you want to also speak and raise your questions, I'd be more than happy to take those. So if I just see this.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that lecture, sir. There's a question in that chat box. What do McKinsey look for in a candidate for a technical profile? That's a question from Dhruv.
Yeah. So in a technical profile, right? So let's say a quantum lab where we have data scientists and engineers, they would look for people who have some background in insights work, in an analyst work, with some coding experience. Not all, you don't need to be fully proficient because McKinsey provides a lot of training, but they would want people, I think, ideally with either you have a good kind of stats maths knowledge, because a lot of the models are built off that background, and or you have very good ability to code for the technical profile. So if you're applying as a data scientist or if you're applying as a data engineer, there's some expectation that you've used some of it in the past. You may not be fully proficient, but at least you've used some of it in the past, and there's a bit of like training that would be needed. But that's what they would expect for data scientist engineers role. For product managers, again, like for product managers, for developers, they on the technical side again, for developers, they would expect you to know coding because that is the fundamental skill you need to have as a developer. And for a designer, again, like you would want to have, we have something called McKinsey by Design. It's a different team altogether that we work with. And they would want you to have some background, education background and experience background in design. So I don't know, for example, there's a 2-year design course in Imperial College, which is one of the best in the world. And we do get a lot of recruits from there. Design is very niche area right now, right? Like it's only starting to expand, but they would expect you to have had some knowledge in that area. And so that's on the technical profiles. On the business side, of course, like it's more about like what I think in the business side, you can literally check online, right? Like they'll give you, there's so many articles already on kind of things we look for is things like achievements, be it academic or professional. What is the impact you've had so far in your work? And they like knowing that a lot. Like, have you been able to make significant impact in your life so far, professionally, or even if you've done something at school? Teamwork, entrepreneurship. Again, those are traits they would look for, because essentially once you join the teams, you will be working in quite large teams. You'll have leadership, you'll have your own team members, and you'll have clients. A lot of clients are tricky. So that's where the teamwork and the entrepreneurship comes. And entrepreneurship, I think, is quite a big part, because you do get a lot of responsibility. So from day one, you could be running conversations with chief executives and they give you that kind of responsibility to do it. But that means you need to be entrepreneurial. You need to be thinking yourself a lot. There's a lot more ownership given to the employees. So that's why they look for a bit of the entrepreneurial traits as well.
Thank you for answering that, sir. Joe, I hope that your question is answered. And there's another question, sir, from Akshat. When working on any of these business title, for example, translator, whom do one reports to? Clients or senior manager, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, this depends on what where you come in, right? So when I was a translator, I came in as a advisor from McKinsey, right? So when I come in as an advisor, my reporting is very similar. Like I was basically an engagement manager. So I am responsible to report to the client leadership with who, as an engagement manager at McKinsey, you have one session a week with the chief executives to tell them what's happening and also to get their inputs and remove blockers, right? Like in the fraud case, for example, one of the clients was failing to participate. So you can just raise that to the client executive and say, if you want this to be built, we need this cooperation to happen, and then they'll help you with that. So you normally report to them, and as an analytics translator, that line of reporting always stayed. Ultimately, they are the client. The additional thing that comes with is you're a partner with so you have, when you work in an advisory service, you normally have an owner from the advising firms, in this case, McKinsey, and you also have an owner from the client side. So they're joint owners to the project. So you're parallel, you don't report to them, but you work jointly as partners to solve that problem. So from that perspective, there is no extra reporting that comes in there. So I think the gist of the answer is it doesn't matter so much whether you're a translator or you're just a normal business manager. You'll always report to senior leadership in the client side. The extra thing that comes as a translator is you'll have a joint owner with you from the client who's at the same level as you. And most likely you treat them at the same level, but most likely you know a lot more because the clients don't understand what the translator role is. So for me, it took me just 2 months to teach my counterpart what they should be doing as a translator, because at the end of the day, I will leave the client at some point and they still need to have someone internally who can carry on with other projects as a translator. So you need to kind of make them learn, but they are a peer from a client perspective.
Oh, thank you for that answer, sir. So there's another question from Adrish. Does McKinsey provide consultancy in manufacturing industries like car manufacturers?
I mean, yeah, pretty much all industries are covered, right? So yeah, car manufacturers, there'll be lots of work there around operations. So I'm pretty sure car manufacturers today are thinking about what is the car industry going to look like in 10 years with EV coming out, right? So, I mean, McKinsey and I would say maybe at least McKinsey, as far as I know, will provide advisory across any sector you can imagine. Like I mentioned, like I've done some bit of work on climate change with governments as well, right? And governments will look up to us to help them make very bold decisions in some of these things. We don't do policy stuff, like policies we don't advise governments on policy. And that's a decision we took consciously. But yeah, across all sectors, there's always work happening.
All right, sir. Thank you. There's another question from Akshat again. As a product manager, role that you mentioned was go-to-market strategy. So does that involve creating and excluding a 360-degree marketing campaign? In second,
Yeah. Sorry, should I take that or?
Yes, so please go ahead, sir.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's a good question. I think that's a good question to understand the level of detail. The short answer is typically no. When you say go-to-market strategy, it's a strategy, you're not executing. So you would typically say things like, let me think of an example, right? Like, let's say you've built this Amazon business I was talking about, where you provide freight solutions to SME businesses, right? So that they can use your logistics. Now you've built the digital product, and the go-to-market strategy is, what do you do with this? In this case, do you basically do viral marketing, right? So viral marketing is things like what PayPal would do. Like as soon as if you use the product and you refer someone else, you get 10 pounds, right? So as soon as you do that, it goes viral and a lot of people end up using the product. Or that seems like in this case, it won't work because it's SME businesses. The other end of things where you don't go so granular is you have discussed, if the value of the product is high, let's say you're selling a software that's worth 1 million, in those cases, you typically have one-to-one conversations with the stakeholders, right? So maybe Like if I give you an example of Tesla, Tesla had, or let's say SpaceX, which is the other Elon Musk organization. They won't go to the government to say every day or do viral marketing or do Facebook marketing or Instagram marketing, right? The product value is so high. They will probably do 3 years of discussions. And most likely in these 3 years, you'll have Elon Musk joining the conversations with the government to say, SpaceX is a great program. Help us, be one of our customers to fund it, etc. It's a long stage negotiation. So that's the other end of the go-to-market strategy. One is viral, where it's like every person gives another person, and that's how you sell and you go to market. The other is you do 3-year-long negotiation strategies, and that depends on the value of the product. Now, in the specific example I gave you with SME businesses, that's probably not what you would do. You do a mix. And let's say hypothetically you decide the strategy is, there are some businesses in some sectors where I'm going to have a sales representative and they're going to do cold calling and they're going to call. Maybe first is not even calling, right? First is an automated email, a chatbot solution. And then the second, for the ones who actually want to spend, we'll help them convert and we'll call them and we know they've shown interest, we'll help them convert. Equally, you can do Facebook and social media marketing to get to those SME customers because a lot of them have business accounts, right? So you could do social media, search engine optimization, all those things to get to them. So you decide the strategy. But most likely for you to be successful, then you need a digital marketing expert who then goes in and he thinks a lot more about, okay, my product manager has told me that the target market is SME. SME is good, fine, but I need these SMEs to be in cities. So I need these SMEs to be in these sectors. So they then think of all those extra personalization that, for example, that could be needed, and they'll help you execute the campaign. But as a product manager, you typically don't get into the level of detail of execution of campaigns. You set the overall strategy of how do you want to go to market.
Thank you for answering that, sir. Sir, if your time permits, can we take one last question, sir?
Yeah, of course.
All right, sir. So there's a question from Shweta. Hello, building up on a previous question, as someone with a tech background who wants to do Tech-MBA, am I eligible for a position as a translator, or is there a junior level that you grow from while at McKinsey?
Right. So I think that depends. That depends a lot on what your tech background is. So if your tech background has been a lot about, let's say, coding or data science or along those lines, and you do an MBA and that gives you the business level experience. Now, typically you would join as an associate. That's the post MBA starting position at McKinsey. It differs a bit by country. I think in India you would start as a junior associate after an MBA. I think in the US and Europe you start as an associate. There's not much of a difference, to be honest. You start off as an associate. Now, when you start off as an associate, you could be a specialist. So you could actually say, I only want to do data science and do a translator role. And you can join, for example, Quantum Black, who do only analytics projects, and you can be the translator for them. Or you could start and say, I'll be an associate, understand the business side of things a bit more and understand management day-to-day a bit more of how we apply that with our clients. And then maybe take a rotation to translator. You can always do a rotation in McKinsey, right? So maybe you say, oh, I spend a year, I like, in this case, let's say you want to work across industries. So I want to spend a year doing pharma. I want to spend a year doing financial services, spend a year doing automobiles. At the end of the year, now I've understood a lot of business problems. I've solved strategy. I've solved costs, all those things. Now, year 2, I want to do a translator role, and I move into Quantum Lab. You could do that, or equally, you could say, I want to start off from being a translator. And then you'll grow as a translator. So when you start off as a translator, as an associate, you'll have a work stream. You're solving for a use case. As you grow and you become an engagement manager translator, you'll have 5 use cases running parallelly and you're managing them with your team. Each use case will have a team member who's a translator, but you're overall the engagement manager managing all 5 use cases. Like for the client I was talking about, we were running 20 use cases, which is by far very big transformation program, 2 years. So kind of seeing all 20 use cases is not so easy because you need to know all the business side and all the enough about the data science on each of those projects. So that's where you would grow to. And then after an engagement manager, you typically go into associate partner and partner where you become an expert. You're not running it day to day, but you'll spend 1 day a week on each of your projects. to give guidance. Plus, you'll also do a lot more business development work.
Thank you, sir. So are you open for one more question, or shall we wrap it up, sir?
No, I can do a few more questions if helpful.
All right, sir. So there's a question from Ashlesh Suryavamshi. So he says, I have a mechanical background and working in for steel giant. I want to transcend into consulting. What all skills I can start building from now and inside a B school?
Okay, got it. That's a good question. So there are lots of instances of, so there are two routes to get into consulting broadly. There is a experienced hire route. And I'll have to share some nuances as I go, because again, different geographies work very differently, even within the same firm. Just to give you an example of how things are different, like I think in India, if you had seen 10 years back, most of the big consulting firms and also the big banks, they would typically only hire engineers at the starting level and this position. Now, over 10 years, they've become a bit more broader. They go into a bit more institutions, but pretty sure they don't end up hiring people with, let's say, an arts background right now. So they haven't opened up that much. Whereas in Europe and US, more so in Europe, they don't care about what your background is. As long as in the interview stage, you're able to think through as rigorously as any other candidate. So they think through how sharp is your logic and can you show that logic in interviews? And rest of the things they feel you can learn over time, right? So maybe you're not solid in quant because you've done history, but there are so many projects, first of all, that don't need the amount of quant. Like if I give you the example of climate change, how do you resolve or how do you make residential buildings carbon neutral by 2050? I doubt you can do a big data exercise there. It's more conceptual problem solving. It requires rigors of thinking conceptually. Equally, like those people can get into quant projects very quickly because it doesn't take a lot of time to learn in Excel, right? So there's like, they do want to learn as well. So that's the difference geography, like just as an example. But there are two routes to getting into consulting. One is a lateral hire where you've had like 3, 4, 5 years of experience, and then you want to move into consulting. And then you can say, I either go, in Shweta's case, Shweta, you could say, I can either go in as, this is Ashray, I think. In Ashray's case, you could say that I either go in as a steel specialist or, heavy industry specialist, because that's one of the verticals we do. And you can say, I have great expertise in this, and I can advise clients. That's one route. And I think that's a route that's most obvious. The other route in lateral hire is you say, no, I join in, but then I don't want to join an industry. I want to be a generalist. I want to explore sectors. There, it could be, maybe not that tough, to be honest, because if you crack the interviews, I think there you need to kind of make your resume better. So your resume would need to say, I've had impact, I've had teamwork, all those things. So that's definitely a way of getting. Lateral hires are a lot tougher. MBA routes are usually better, because there is always kind of recruitment every year, structured way for MBAs. So the other route, which a lot of people take while switching from industry or to consulting, is they go via MBA and then the structured MBA route, where every year there is hiring. And there, of course, I think the benefit is you'll also know how to build your resume. You'll have a lot of case study practice with your colleagues or classmates at your MBA school, which doesn't happen so much when you're doing on your own, right? Then you have to find people to do case studies with. The tech related skills, I think that's a good question. And those are like, I think I would almost think from a technology perspective. So you want to, there is a part on automation. So you of course want to know how these technologies work. MBA schools would be great because you will know from a tech MBA, like what are case studies similar to the one we discussed, because the more you do it, the more you understand how these technologies are going to work and you'll identify opportunities. You want to know enough about data science. So again, like if you want, you can go into the depth of it and actually learn and become a data scientist. But if not, you need to know enough on data science models. What are the different models out there? Which industries are using what for what use cases? What are some of the metrics that you would learn? Things like lift, for example. And then I think while you're at B school, you also then get to know what are the roles coming up in these spaces, right? The third, digital products. I think product management is definitely a great skill to have. So you need to be able to understand how product management works. How do you want to prioritize? Like even basic frameworks, like things like normally how you would prioritize your features to build in digital products is you would say one axis is what is the impact for a customer? Is it low importance, high importance, medium importance? And then your other axis is the amount of time and effort it takes to build. So based on that framework, you can almost start prioritizing with features to build. You ideally want to start with high impact, but low time to build features. Right. So those are kind of things you'd want to learn from a product management perspective in working with developers. You should, of course, ideally also figure out how some of these platforms work, right? So what is their business model? If you go into Ocado, for example, and you search for things, how does the e-commerce site work? Or media monetization, like how basics of like how search works in Google, right? What auction model do they run? First price, second price? Is it only the highest bidder who wins, or is there a relevancy criteria? So for example, if a P&G bids for bananas and you search for bananas on Google, will they show you P&G diaper product? Most likely a customer would not click at it because they've looked at bananas, right? So Google, everyone would have a relevancy criteria that says it's not just who pays highest, but it's also the most relevant products that go in there. So start understanding a bit about businesses as well. And then the last part I would say is irrespective of which area of tech, you need to understand the softwares. So Trello or a Slack or a Jira or a Confluence, just do a demo, see for yourself how it works. I would say for me, like those would be like skills. If I were like 5 years back, those were the skills I would have loved to build before even getting on a project.
Oh, thank you for that comprehensive answer, sir.
Hello.
Yes.
This is Akshat here. Just one quick question. That one case study that Keshav sir you mentioned was account payable process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in that as our role, so like do we need to come up with the technology solutions like okay RPA and OCR are applicable, or does it come from the client side that we need to use RPA? Tell us how. So how does that work?
Yeah, so there are two ways it could work. So normally, if you think of a particular problem, so let's say the client comes and says, or unit in Ocado as I'm doing right now, like let's say the client says, our accounts payable is very manual, lots of errors. How can we make this automated? And they leave it open-ended. In which case, we know very well, like you can use RPA and OCR and automate the entire process. So we give the recommendation, let's use RPA and OCR. In other cases, when we're doing big transformation work, let's say 2 years, 3 years, and we're trying to get client to a better P&L at the end of 5-year period, because transformations won't give you impact immediately, right? It takes time to build, and then it takes time once you've built for those to affect your P&L. In those big transformation programs, we'll say, okay, what are the big initiatives we want to be running? And we'll get some sort of a maturity assessment, right? Let's say we speak to their senior management, we speak to some of the business owners, and we say, okay, how digitally savvy are you? How much are you building digitally to work with customers? What is the extent of use of automation technology? What is the extent of use of data science? And let's say they hypothetically come and say, well, automation technology, we don't know much, we haven't used much. Data science I've used a little, and that's the level of insight we get. Then we figure out what are the use cases within the organization where we can use automation technology. So we'll say, okay, automation technology at the end of 3 years could deliver, let's say, $20 million worth of savings. And then we work with the business owners to figure out what are the exact areas these can be used. And let's say we figure out very quickly, speaking to accounts payable executive, it's fully manual. So we say, okay, automation technology, 20 million. Of the 20 million, 1 million is going to come from accounts payable because we've identified the use of RPA and OCR there. Second, we say, okay, you're always interacting with customers. Customer service is always by phone. So someone's calling you and you have customer service picking up. Great. Another use. We can use chatbots. Chatbots also uses similar automation technologies. It basically uses natural language processing to understand what's the chat back and forth you've had, and then overlays it with machine learning to understand what's the best response to give for as a chatbot. So we'll say, great, 1 million from accounts payable, 1 million from chatbots, and that's how you start building up the initiatives. So you can do it both ways. If the client comes to you with a specific problem, you'll know very well like what technology to use to solve it. If the client says, I want a big transformation program to help deliver revenue and cost and better P&L, and you help us think through what all the things we could do. Then we start out by thinking of the technologies, the size, and then thinking of specific use cases within each.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. And just one question from the second slide. Like you mentioned, your current role as a media monetization at Ocado. And I'm coming from the digital marketing background. So just curious to know that what exactly is the difference in core digital marketing like SEO, SMM, and content marketing versus media monetization?
Yeah, so media monetization is, imagine I'm Facebook, right? So I am providing you the inventory. So and as a digital marketing person, or let's say that you're part of a company or an agency, you have a budget, and you have a budget to spend, let's say, of $10,000, right? Now you're thinking, I want to target, and let's say, or hypothetically, just for Ocado's case to make it relevant, you're a digital marketing person at P&G. You have a budget of $10,000. You decide how to spend it. You can spend $2,000 in Facebook, $2,000 on Google, $2,000 on Amazon, and you can spend $2,000 with Ocado, right? So I am providing the inventory to you. I'm actually generating the business for Ocado, but I sell that inventory like Google and Facebook would sell their spaces to suppliers, to brands. So that's the difference. As a digital marketing person, you're spending budget. You're my customer, and I'm providing you the space to spend it. And rest is all very similar, right? So classic digital marketing, you will, the good thing with a difference, or the difference between Facebook and Google is they won't click to immediately buy product. In Ocado, when you advertise, people click and they shop and they immediately buy the product. So there's a better conversion, but the funnel will be the same, right? So you put a sponsored product like how you put on Google. Actually, let me just show you, right? Like while you're here, I can just show you to make it more tangible. Give me 1 second. Are you able to see?
Yes, sir.
Right. So this is my account on Ocado, and it's brilliant. Like in the sense, grocery is repetitive, right? So usually I would you kind of book your delivery. So you go here and you say, okay, fine. Ocado's, because of COVID, we are fully out. Like we've grown 50 to 90% this year. Everyone's ordering with us, and we've run out of capacity, which is why for the next few days you see there are no delivery slots, which is not a problem usually, because I will go out and I'll see, okay, Sunday there's a delivery slot. I click on it. Then as long as you book something worth 40 pounds or more, your order is blocked. You can keep changing your order all the time you want, but initially you just block something 40 pounds. And because grocery is repetitive, very simple. I go into something called favorites. These are all the things I've bought in the past. I'll say, yeah, I love breads. I want onions. I want garlic. I want yogurt. I want paneer. I want milk. I want almond milk. I want granola. And quickly you'll see on the top, you'll easily fill 40 pounds because grocery is so repetitive, right? Now I say, okay, fine. But you know what? I've never had soft drinks from Ocado, right? So you'll see there's a search item here. And a lot of customers would just search for things they want. So they'll say, okay, I want soft drinks. So I search for soft drinks. You'll see now there's a banner here, right? There's an impression here. Now it's a mix. Actually, this is not the best example because it's an internal banner, but let me just do a quick refresh. Let's say I want water instead of soft drinks. So I say I want water here, okay? Now you'll see there's a banner, right? Now these are all Nestle products. So Nestle has bought the space. They want anyone searching for water, they should see the space. And they say, I'm willing to pay $2,000 for that. Because I know that the moment someone sees it, and let's say, usually good banners will say 20% off and most people will click on it. And the moment they click on it, I add to trolley. So you as a digital marketing person, you spend $2,000 and you immediately get to know that for some of it at least, there's a good ROI because I've added something worth £2 to the basket. And it's a click, right? So your conversion in your Facebook model, the conversion happens from impressions, which is where you see your customer sees something, to a click on that impression, where you click on that and come to a new page, to a conversion where you actually add something to the basket. And like Facebook, Google, you'll get an ROI, which says you spend $2,000, your ROI is 500%, which means you're getting $10,000 for the $2,000 you spent. But that's the space I monetize on Ocado. So that's the entire It's basically like running a Google and Facebook model business within Ocado. And Amazon does this as well. Amazon actually has a very big advertising business at $20 billion. They're only next to Facebook and Google in terms of how much media they monetize. Does that help answer?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Keshav sir.
Thank you for answering that, sir. Well, there's another question. What would be the growth level if joining McKinsey after doing MBA from consulting?
So growth level within consulting, I guess, or is it growth level after doing MBA after doing consulting?
Maybe the question is related to the growth levels, like career progression, maybe.
Within McKinsey, okay. Yeah, I mean, typically after MBA, you would join in as an, like I said, as an associate. In India, I think as a junior associate, I can't recollect. But that's a position that everyone with an MBA joins at. Then you spend, depending on how quickly you want to progress and how quickly you've also gotten the skill set, the average is 2 years you'll spend as associate, then you get to engagement manager. So as an associate, you have one work stream, like I said. As an engagement manager, you're in charge of the entire projects. You'll have 5 work streams, and you'll have either an analyst or an associate working on each work stream. That's when you manage projects. You also start doing some business development. Then you spend another 2-3 years, and then you go into associate partner. Associate partner, you'll do multiple projects at a time, but each project you spend only 1 day a week, right? And you will also become an expert in a particular field by that time. And then another 2 years, you become partner at the organization. So as a partner, you maybe a bit more difference in associate partner, but you typically spend less time on each project. You have more projects. You do a lot of business development. You attend all the client CEO meetings. And then I think the last level is senior partner. And that's like when you become the boss in the organization with no one to report to. And you're part of like the shareholders council and all the leadership areas of the firm. That is the final stage of senior partner. So basically, from the time you join as associate, usually I would think 8 to 10 years as a senior partner. If you actually are very driven and you are a workaholic and you don't mind working 18 hours a day and you're doing well, you could probably get there in 5 years. Like there's an example in India, a guy called Aditya. Actually, I think in the Bangalore or the Bombay office, and he made senior partner at 25, who is the youngest in, I think, the whole of McKinsey to make senior partner at 25. So that way, it's not like, it depends purely on how you want to play it. There's no strict rule that you have to spend 2 years at every position. If you actually do amazingly well, you can go, we have 2 reviews every year. So every 6 months, you could be moving actually if you show that amount of progress.
Thank you for that answer, sir. Guys, last chance, unmute yourself and ask any question if you have.
Hello, Akshat again. Sir, just wanted to ask that were you clear from the beginning that you want to go in the consulting role, or like how did you how did you find your passion for consulting? Did you get any chance to explore anything, or how your thought process went?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I probably won't have the best answer of how I went through. My thought process was it was one of the few opportunities back then that was I think that was highly rated, in the sense like a lot of my peers were trying to get into big organizations, and I had similar ambition. I thought McKinsey is a great place, and that's why I wanted to join it. Consulting is good because it'll help me build some broad skill sets that you need to know in any organization, right? Like, and I didn't do an MBA, right? So for me, that extra managerial kind of leadership and training, all those things, I think McKinsey was the house there. Like McKinsey, I still feel does one of the best trainings. There's a balance, because when you join McKinsey, a lot of people when they join McKinsey, they feel compared to the hours worked, the pay is not as much as banks give. And even compared to competitors, McKinsey pays less because they have a better brand. But what you do realize is the sheer amount of investment they make in training you is incredible, right? They'll take you to places, they'll get the best training available to you wherever you want it. And that for me, when I was thinking before having spoken to a few people at McKinsey, I thought that in initial years for me, to be honest, like pay was important, and they do offer reasonably good pay. It's just when you compare to banks, you feel, you always feel greedy, right? You see, why not more? And that's when for me, I was like, I'm still starting. I'd rather prefer getting more skills. And also for me, banking meant working in one area. Here I'm getting the industry experience. I can be working in pharma, financial services, all those industries, right? I, at that point, didn't know what industry I liked. So in the philosophical terms of what, I don't know if you guys have read, but I recently finished a book called 0 to 1 by DThree. And he says you can either be definite in your approach or indefinite. Indefinite is, you take up a career like consulting where you get all the good skills and wherever you go, you'll get a good career path, but you don't have a definite vision of what you want to do. That's what I was like 5 years back. I knew I want to get all the skills, but I didn't have a definite vision that I want to build the best financial services business, or I want to build the best pharmaceutical business. So I thought, let's get into consulting, get all the skill sets, and then think. And that worked for me at that point, right? Like that works very well. And in retrospect, I think two things I realized is one, there's a lot you can learn. Why a lot of people still try to get into a Goldman or a McKinsey or a BCG. And there is a lot of like pros of doing that. Equally, you can be bold and do something different, right? Like today, the tech world has exploded. You could be joining a Deliveroo and running a business for them. Like right now, what I'm doing with Ocado, and it's partly because I've been at McKinsey, I got the opportunity, but I'm helping them build this media monetization business. And it's we do have like some things already, but we're building a full self-serve Google style business where we are in a platform, suppliers go choose auction models. So there's a bit of like almost agreeing businesses with platform, getting media agencies, then trying of monetizing the space. We get videos, podcasts, all those things. It's a business I'm trying to create. Now, in retrospect, 5 years back, had I been offered this, I would have taken it because I can learn so much from starting a business across all fields, including maybe less through training, but more on the job, but including like training and managing a team. And one thing I've realized managing a team here at Ocado versus McKinsey is at McKinsey, when you're a manager, you get very high quality associates. So you know the product is always going to be good. You need to manage the project overall according to timelines, etc. And there's some training involved. When I'm at Ocado, I've suddenly realized that's not the threshold for people you work with. And there are people who are not giving you good products to start with. So you have to think a lot more. And that's typically across most firms. As a manager, you'll have a lot more role than what you'd have at McKinsey for the same project. Now, the difference is McKinsey will move at 10 times the pace as any other industry because we normally deliver projects to very short timelines. So that pace drives a bit more challenge. But the people you work with, it's easier to manage in McKinsey than elsewhere. So I think in retrospect, I have realized that those are not necessarily the only career options, but the booming space in tech and startups, etc. And as long as you feel confident about yourself and what you're doing, you can make a switch at different points in time. But that depends on that requires you to build the skills and be confident. So there's no set career path. Now, the reason I've joined Ocado is now I'm thinking I want to specialize. I want to go into an industry. I can keep continuing with McKinsey for a long time, but I've realized there are some areas that excite me, and that's why I'm trying a secondment to figure out whether tech and media retail is one of the areas of interest for me. I should say, Akshat, I think a good way for you to learn, which I did a lot, is I've been an introvert for most part of my life, and I always thought reaching out to people on LinkedIn for networking was a bit transactional and not great. But to be honest, like if you really want to understand about what different roles are, what different businesses are, and it varies by firm, I found that helpful just reaching out to people on LinkedIn, asking them for 15 minutes of time. And especially I think as you do an MBA, right, you'll have like different people in different industries working from your school. That's one easy way of like calling them up and saying, can I spend 15 minutes? I just want to get a sense of the work you're doing. And that helps you narrow down a bit more because you know more about what each role is. So don't restrict yourself from doing that just because you think it's transactional. I think people do value it, and others on the table will have gone through that experience. So they'll be more than willing to give you that detail on what they do in their day-to-day jobs.
All right, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much for the goldmine of insights.
Thanks. That was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for answering that very comprehensively, sir. So there are no other questions. So can we wrap it up now, sir?
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing from my side. So if there are no questions, happy to take it.
Yes, sir. So finally, thank you for taking time out and interacting with us, sir. Session was thoroughly engaging and extremely structured and very lucidly explained. So, and the way you explained the existing caps for the current roles and the precise description of difference between the tech and techno managers was really special. And at last, I take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome for you to visit our campus of IIT Jodhpur whenever the things get back to normal, sir. So, Krishna, sir, if you have
Thanks.
anything to say, please do.
Sure. Keshav, thank you so much for this session. I think I did learn a lot in some of the subtleties of what's happening out in the world there. I'm sure the students have also benefited a lot. Thank you so much for taking time off on Sunday. And I'm sure the 18-hour workday weekends are very precious for you. Spending 2 hours for the students, I hope it's made difference to some of them, and I hope maybe the recorded session can be useful for a few more in the school and maybe outside as well. Thank you so much for that. We look forward to extended engagement over a period of time on various topics, and we'll look upon your experience and guidance so the students can get benefited, and as well as the faculty, so that we can get in touch with the actual world out there. Thank you so much.
No, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Krishna, and thanks so much, Shrutin, for giving the opportunity. My pleasure completely. And I think great. I think it's a great, definitely I think the area where most of the industry is sitting. So I think I was quite excited also learning about the Tech-MBA program and how it's able to combine the managerial part, but with the technology part, which has been the evolution of the last 10 years, right? Given it's such a big area of the economy. So thanks so much for the opportunity as well to speak. And it's also made me think on a few questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so
This is
much.
all out. Yeah.
Have a good weekend.
Thanks so much. You too. All have a good weekend. All right.
Bye.
Thank you all for joining.
Bye-bye.
Bye.